Hello everyone. Today we are here to discuss the multifaceted world of per and poly-fluoroalkyl substances PFAS. PFAS is used in different sectors like aerospace, automotive, food contact materials, textiles, construction, electronics, household products and medical devices. Even though medical device contribution to overall PFAS emission is low, the industry will be significantly impacted by a PFAS ban. This is because PFAS suppliers cater to multiple industries. Even if medical devices are exempted from the ban, the supply chain will still be affected if major raw material suppliers cease PFAS production. To give you an idea of the scale, there are about 15,000 different PFAS substances in use across the various industries. The medical device industry is going to face increased scrutiny and the need to reformulate products to reduce or eliminate the PFAS content. Let's take a deep dive into these group of chemicals, the restriction proposal and impact on the industry. I am Dolly Sharma. I have done masters in microbiology. I have been into medical device industry for 12 years into the regulatory domain. I have worked with manufacturers, I have worked in consulting, I have also been an auditor for medical device sector. Within Tata Elxsi, I work as a practice lead and I also take up the PFAS related services that are offered in Tata Elxsi. Today we have with us 4 experts to enlighten us on how to tackle this situation. I request the audience to post their questions in the chat box and we will get back to you with your answers in your upcoming sessions. We have the expert panel members from Tata Elxsi and Tufsud South Asia.
Thank you, Dolly. Hi, everyone. My name is Vamsi Ravalli. I am a biomedical engineer by education. I have been working with Tata Elxsi for more than a decade now. I lead the practice, the regulatory practice team in Tata Elxsi, and well, I have been in this industry for more than 15 years now, and I'm happy to be on this panel. Thank you. Sandeep?
Thank you, Vamsi. I am Dr. Sandeep Patnaik, and by education, I am a PhD in nanoscience and nanotechnology. And I have spent almost 8 years in the regulatory space of medical devices. My specialty being mostly biocompatibility, chemistry and material evaluation, product stewardship, especially dealing with substances such as CMREDs, phthalates, and of late, we also have PFAS added to these substances. So I'm happy to be part of this panel, and maybe I would now request Niket. Could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Sandeep. My name is Niket, and I'm a biocompatibility expert at Tufsud. My background is in preclinical safety evaluation of pharmaceuticals and medical devices, especially in toxicology, biocompatibility, and related regulatory aspects. I have had the privilege of working with animal testing laboratories, pharmaceutical R&Ds, medical device manufacturing, as well as the service industries that support medical device manufacturing regulatory affairs. It's really been a pleasure to be part of this expert panel, and I'm looking forward to have an interesting discussion. So next I'll request Krishna to introduce himself.
Thank you, Nikhil. Myself, Krishna Chaitanya. I am the sterilization and packaging expert at Tufsud, having 10 years of dedicated experience in medical device industry, especially in quality assurance, regulatory affairs, and development, implementation, and maintenance of quality management system, which has enabled me to know the action should be taken while any ban or restrictions happened on the substances. Apart from that, I have been a sponsor representative in monitoring the evaluations and testings of medical devices in biocompatibility and microbial fields.
Thank you, Krishna. So just for the audience to know, I will quickly introduce Tata Elxsi and Tufsud. Tata Elxsi is a global design and technology service company headquartered in Bangalore. It addresses healthcare, automotive, broadcast, media and communication, consumer electronic industries. The Tata Elxsi's healthcare and life science practice is specifically catering to pharmaceutical and medical device domains, where we provide extensive services around product engineering, regulatory compliance, digital and software solution in healthcare domain. Whereas Tufsud is a globally renowned leader in testing, certification, auditing, and advisory services in industries such as automotive, manufacturing, energy, and healthcare. Speaking of healthcare sector, Tufsud excels in providing comprehensive solution for medical devices and healthcare services. Their specialists offer market access solution, regulatory expertise, quality management for medical devices, ensuring the compliance and safety from design to delivery. So today's discussion will revolve around the complex world of these persistent chemicals, where we would like to explore the latest research that is ongoing, the regulatory development and innovative solutions. Our expert panel will discuss the challenges and opportunities surrounding PFAS with a particular focus on how medical device sector can proactively address these issues. Just a quick fact, did you know a person on an average consumes about a credit card's worth of plastic every week through food, water and air? Yeah, that's right. We are all accidental plastic eaters. Maybe it's time we rethink our diet plans, right? Without further ado, let me begin with an ice-breaking question to you, Vamsi. Could you introduce the general audience on what is PFAS and why is there a surge in attention towards them?
Sure, I would be more than happy to start this interesting discussion. So, in very layman terms, PFAS is called the forever chemical. It affects our health, it affects our livelihood, the environment. And why forever, you might ask? It has very strong carbon-fluorine bonds that do not allow it to degrade in the environment. So, it persists in the environment for a very long time. And PFAS, as you've already mentioned in your introduction, there are more than 10 to 15,000 PFAS materials in the atmosphere right now in the environment. And they come in all kinds of, they come for all kinds of uses, they have all kinds of impacts, and they come in all kinds of risk categories. You have high risk PFAS, you have, ranging to low risk PFAS. High risk PFAS, sometimes they are known to have caused cancer, they cause issues with your reproductive system, endocrine system and all. And you have low concern PFAS also available in the market, and they have their own uses and applications. However, irrespective of whether it's a high risk PFAS or a low risk PFAS, the production process itself releases a lot of harmful substances into the environment. PFAS earlier was not like a celebrity subject, but what has happened is when 3M faced that litigation, where it did not address the adverse effects of PFAS on human health or environment, I think then the limelight, it kind of focused on PFAS. And now the regulators, the government bodies, the manufacturers, and even general public is made fully aware of what PFAS is.
However, as per my understanding, I thought that PFAS is known as a very stable material, and that's why it has been used across so many industries. So, but how can such a material lead to such harmful effects in the biological system? Sandeep, if you can elaborate on it.
Yeah, Dolly. So mostly the polymeric class of PFASs are usually the most stable materials.
Yeah.
However, PFAS are a large class of compounds with varying chemistries, and we have to understand that they have broader implications.
Correct.
So there are several studies that have linked long-term exposure to several PFASs with serious health issues, including cancer, liver damage, and immune system impairment, as well as developmental effects in children. So I would say that the impact of PFAS is more of an indirect nature, which is from migrating from the environment by means of either drinking water, soil, etc. And perhaps this is the reason why this has gained the attention of government bodies as well as regulators.
Yeah. So may I say it justifies with great power comes great responsibility. Hence, we need to use PFAS wisely and find ways to manage their impact. It's clear from Sandeep's response that biocompatibility is not the whole story.
Exactly.
PFAS can have an indirect impact also. And building on this point, Krishna, can you let us know that how this PFAS accumulates in the organism and increase the concentration over time?
Dolly, you have made a crucial point. PFAS do bioaccumulate because they resist breakdown and elimination, allowing them to persist in tissues after exposure through air, water, and food. Over the time, repeated exposures lead to increasing concentrations of PFAS in the body as they are absorbed faster than they removed. As Sandeep said earlier, this buildup, particularly in long-living species, can reach levels that pose several health risks such as cancer, immune system alteration, and hormonal disruption.
So the carbon fluorine bond itself is so strong that it does not break in the environment, and that is why it migrates from water bodies to the soil to the vegetation to the living organism, and that is why the restriction of PFAS is building up. So circling back to you, Vamsi, can you shed some more light on the most significant PFAS restrictions that are currently being enforced globally and how these regulations may vary by region?
Sure, just like any other regulation, even the PFAS regulation varies by geography. It varies in terms of scope, stringency, the way it is implemented, right? I think, for example, the EU has taken a more comprehensive approach to managing PFAS, whereas I think US is looking at application-wise management of PFAS. Even the different states within the US, they have varied regulations. Other countries like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Asia, they are all coming up with all these requirements or regulations for PFAS. So yeah, I would actually ask Niket to throw some light from a regulatory body perspective.
Certainly, as you have mentioned, many regions have initiated their distinct way of proposing restriction on PFAS. The regulatory landscape for PFAS is complex and it varies globally. The EU is moving towards phasing out non-essential use of PFAS, adopting a precautionary approach, while US employs a more risk-based strategy. Some countries have established the national drinking water regulation for the PFAS, while other countries are still conducting the assessment on use and environmental release of it. Hence, all the agencies are moving towards preventing PFAS from entering into the environment and thereby protecting the public health. So, we will have to wait for the final proposal, I guess.
Perhaps I would like to add a few points to what Niket has just said. Often these agencies are seen adding new measures every now and then. One example which I can immediately think of is the one from EPA that released early last month. They released a new test order for the specific PFAS substance, the 6,2-fluorotelomeric acrylate, if I am right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and now this fluorotelomer is used across several manufacturing sectors. So, yeah, and as of early 2024, we have almost 10 US states who have brought up legislations related to PFAS, and there are several other US states which are in the pipeline. So, some of the key measures include the California's Prop 65 regulation, which mandates labeling of PFAS related substance and also bans PFAS in sectors such as food packaging as well as children products. And we also have then the Colorado's wide ban, which bans intentionally added PFAS. And there are the other states such as Connecticut, Hawaii, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, and New York, Vermont, and including Washington. All of them are, ruminating over banning PFAS in some way or the other across different manufacturing sectors. So, looking at the way things are shaping up, I feel there are three ways in which this could move forward. One is perhaps reduced concentrations, or complete replacements, or perhaps for sectors like medical device, we could also hope for an exemption. So, however, we have to realize that industry sectoral exemptions might undermine our overall goal of reducing PFAS exposures.
Yeah, so with the regulatory requirements shaping up, Sandeep, I really understand that there is a ambiguity whether PFAS will be banned across the industries or across the geographies, and that is why it leads to my next question, that there are high chances that there is a news going around that medical device sector may get exempted from the
Yeah.
PFAS ban. So, why do you think that this would defeat the overall purpose of restricting the PFAS? Or, if I say in another way around, what kind of measures does manufacturer foresee despite the exemption factor?
Okay, I'll try to answer this in my perspective, and I would welcome others to add their thoughts as well. So, to answer your first question, Dolly, there are two ways in which this would move forward, as I mentioned earlier. Either a complete replacement, leading to supply chain disruptions, and the other way in which this could move forward is by exemption. Yeah. So, here I would like to draw your attention to what Vamsi had said earlier regarding the long-term implications, health implications of PFAS. They would still continue to persist. And even though the load on the environment would significantly reduce, we still cannot assure that PFAS is totally eliminated from the environment.
Correct.
And also the PFAS that are manufactured before the restriction takes place, they would still continue to be in the environment.
Right.
So apart from these regulatory concerns, there are also certain non-regulatory factors which manufacturers should keep in mind. To begin with, we have part obsolescence, that is, as in-scope manufacturers pull out of manufacturing of PFAS, then there would be supply chain disruptions. For example, we have 3M, one of the world's largest manufacturer of PFAS, and it is ceasing its production of PFAS by 2025. And so any medical device which contains PFAS parts manufactured by 3M, they are definitely going to face the brunt of supply chain disruption. And this could also lead to the next point which I would like to mention, that is process disruptions. Now, any of these PFAS parts which are used for the MRO processes, that is the maintenance, repair, and operational processes. So, because of supply chain, because of disruption, these parts not only have already the burden of manufacturer reporting these substances, but also we have the brunt of supply chain disruption. Yep. And these substances become either scarcer or more costly. And the third, but the last but not the least, we have the insurance and liability issues that manufacturers will have to think of. Since 2005, there have almost been 6,400 PFAS related lawsuits, and currently the legal landscape is shifting away from focusing on chemical manufacturers to those manufacturers who claim product safety while still using PFAS in their supply chain. So insurers are now taking notice of these things, especially regarding the PFAS, and they are starting to ask their customers to include PFAS related disclosures. So these are a few things which manufacturers need to keep in mind apart from the regulatory compliance aspects.
Yeah. So here I'd like to pitch in to answer your second question, Dolly. What manufacturers should foresee? So actually manufacturers would foresee stricter regulations, increased testing to determine the concentration, load on disposal, potential ban or restriction on PFAS in medical devices. They should invest in research and development to find alternatives, work with suppliers for PFAS-free materials, and address potential challenges in performance, durability, and biocompatibility. Last but not least is financial implications and management. They should conduct a comprehensive analysis on financial impacts of transitioning away from PFAS, including R&D costs, recertification, expenses, and potential revenue losses. They should also implement a gradual transition plan to minimize disruptions to operations and financial implications. They could collaborate with suppliers and the industry partners to share the costs of R&D and recertification. Alongside, they can explore new product lines and new markets to outcash the financial losses.
Yes, Krishna, that's quite a good insight that you have given us. But I would like to add few pointers on the regulatory perspective which we are talking about. Because last night I was just scrolling through the LinkedIn news and PFAS related information, and it might surprise you. There is a specific committee set up by EU Commission. It is IHI, Innovative Healthcare Initiatives, and within this committee there are the policy makers who are discussing that how the future proposals have to be shaped up. And the third topic in it which drew my attention was PFAS in medtech sector, and they are really thinking on designing a full-fledged plan that how specific to medical device sector a PFAS ban should roll out. And I don't know when the publication will come into finalization, but it will be somewhere in early 2025. Apart from that, a very captivating news was around biocompatibility. Since we are also talking about the biocompatibility and PFAS related materials, I think it is important to bring it over here that there is a working group set up by ISO for overhauling the 10993 series. And within this requirement, they are considering an endpoint to be added for bioaccumulation of hazardous substances, and it is PFAS. So we can already see that how even if the mandate from ECHA is right now not out, but the other committees like ISO or EU Commission of Medical Device Sector itself have started, bringing in the restriction and weaving it into the regulatory compliance of medical devices. Yeah, and this is specifically for Europe, but I'm very sure it will quickly penetrate to US, Japan, and other regions. And while I take a note on what Krishna said about the challenges and financial implications that manufacturer will face, I would want Sandeep you to, little bit expand on the supply disruption that you were talking about earlier. So can you comprehend what level of disruption are we talking about from a chemical expert perspective?
Okay, so to judge the level of supply chain disruption that is feasible, we first need to segregate the kind of direct and indirect PFAS presence in our supply chain. So briefly, I would like to explain that by direct presence, I mean the intentional use of PFAS in our manufacturing processes and our operations as such. So this would include our R&D, the research and development, followed by storing, disposal of PFAS containing materials. On the other hand, by indirect presence, I would mean that I would refer to the unintentional exposure of PFAS through either the process aids or auxiliary manufacturing materials, etc. So this can happen through, the indirect exposure could happen through sourcing of materials or through components that probably in traces contain PFAS related substances, or they could trickle in through the environmental contamination and other third party activities.
To reiterate, basically, let's consider a hypothetical scenario where there is a complete exemption for medical devices. But still, if a manufacturer is dependent on a particular supplier to supply all the PFAS related materials, right? And the supplier himself is phasing out, then the manufacturer does not have much of a choice but to search for alternate suitable materials, right? So
exactly, yeah.
So as we have already, been talking about the supplier phase out, and I think we already know that companies like 3M, PPG, Solvay, they have already declared a phase out from PFAS related material with individual timelines, of course. So Vamsi, can you tell us that how do you think that manufacturers are going to face this challenge?
it will definitely be a hurdle. I mean, there's no doubt about it, two ways about it. All this phasing out will ensure that there is supply chain disruption, and then the manufacturers probably have to invest in R&D, supplier qualification, extensive testing perhaps, and all this would require a lot of time and money. So there will be delays about the product in the market. Having said that, the regulatory authorities and other institutions as well, they're, I think, trying to balance the PFAS phase out with the availability of the product in the market, and they are promoting adoption of sustainable material. They're advocating for the manufacturers to actually report all the PFAS uses that they have. I think even the chemical industry, some of the PFAS producers, they are also investing in R&D so that they can provide suitable biodegradable options to the market.
Yeah. So, well, Vamsi, you very aptly pointed out on the disclosure part. In past, we all have seen that there have been regulations building up on the hazardous materials and the declaration of the same on the labels or IFUs. We might have seen the example of CMR substances, phthalates, and we have seen, carrying symbols of containing the material, not containing the material. And to bring this requirement in consideration, I can foresee that there can be an update in the ISO standards like ISO 15223-1 that talks about the symbols that go on medical device labeling, the information that we supply in the information to be supplied for the user. And to see a broader picture for CE certification, I think if we see Annexure 1 of UMDR, the GSPR checklist, it also specifically talks about the material part and also specifically about what goes on the label for the disclosure part. Yeah. So bringing this into consideration, I think there can be updates in these set of documentation, which will then percolate to the manufacturers to update their own technical documentation.
Yes.
So there is like one way or another, it is very vital for the manufacturers to find an alternative, because it can either be mandated by the regulatory authorities or the manufacturer will be forced to change to an alternative material through the supply chain phase out.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Niket, I think you can highlight on what strategies should manufacturers consider when they are looking for alternatives.
Sure, Ollie. I would like to answer that in two parts. One is material evaluation and second is supplier evaluation. PFAS as a material can be present in a product as base material, coating, packaging or processing aid.
Yeah.
But what if the PFAS is present as a non-disclosed constituent of a proprietary mixture? And that is where testing and supplier evaluation is very crucial. To start the search for the alternative of PFAS, one must be aware about the source of PFAS and the function of the product.
Yes.
A few products like frying pans, it is very easy to substitute the PFAS.
Correct.
Whereas the PFAS which is used into the catheters or heart valves, currently there are no substitutes available. Let's consider that the material is developed. Then again, it will have to go with the rigorous testing and it will have to comply with the stringent regulatory requirements of performance and safety standards. So in short, I just want to convey that manufacturers should be ready to invest required amount of time in search of the alternative of PFAS and also investigation of the source of PFAS. Coming to the second part regarding supplier evaluation, manufacturer can conduct the supplier audits and surveys so that manufacturer can come into the obligatory requirements with the suppliers, where suppliers will have to report the use of PFAS, and that is how manufacturer can know the origin of the material and the source of the PFAS. So I would sum it up as the material evaluation and supplier evaluation can be the first steps.
Adding to what you said, Niket, manufacturers should also focus on redesigning their products and process aids. By conducting a thorough inventory of all the process aids, and by evaluating the risks associated with them associated with like exposures of pathways, toxicity, and their current regulatory status. Along with this, I also feel that consumers should know about what changes the product have undergone. This can be done by directly communicating with the consumer about the PFAS related efforts and the steps which we are taking to phase out these chemicals. And we can provide this information in the form of labeling also to the consumers.
That's a wonderful thought, Krishna, when you say that while we stakeholders are already being aware about the PFAS concerns and the regulatory scrutiny growing across the globe, but it is really important on raising the consumer awareness, right? The implementation of regulatory requirements on the disclosure part, bringing in the labeling mandate for the manufacturers to label it clearly that if the product is containing PFAS or not, if it is containing, what is the concentration, what is the amount. We might all have seen gloves, right?
Yeah.
You've seen gloves. So if you see the packaging of gloves, it contains label DHP containing, DHP free. So maybe similar sort of things can be mandated for PFAS also. So based on your work in this field, Vamsi, can you a little bit summarize what is the progress that is made by medical device OEMs so far?
So we work with a lot of global OEMs, some large, some mid-size, and I believe that the OEMs currently, they are pretty much aware of PFAS. I think that awareness is spread, and most of them are in the phase where they're actually spreading this awareness to their suppliers, because and it's actually easier said than done. The reason being, the large OEMs, they have more than 1,000 suppliers, so if they have to spread the word, then it will take some time. And some of them, they have already finished the supplier outreach. I mean, they have been ahead of the game a bit. They are now in the phase where they are actually identifying PFAS out of all. So now those OEMs, they are in a state where they're planning for their upcoming future. It will take a couple of years for them to actually figure out the alternate materials, processing aids, or raw materials for that matter. And my general advice for everyone would be that if you have not begun yet, maybe it is time to begin. The reason being, if you plan early, then you will have enough time to make all the organizational changes which are required to actually embrace the ban and make the phase out possible.
Right.
So I'd just like to add, Niket, from a testing perspective, what do you think the timelines mean?
I agree. I mean, I can start with your thought on when the supply chain is very long, it is even more complicated and often it requires detailed evaluation. If you think that one can simply check the chemical analysis and tell that PFAS is whether present in the product or not, then it is not easy.
Yeah.
It is not easy because we cannot know what we are looking for. There are around 15,000 PFAS and targeted analysis is still catching up due to the certain analytical difficulties, as we know. However, simpler analyses are possible where one can check the fluoride element into the combustible residue, and that can be an indicator of PFAS, but still fluoride can come from other sources as well.
True.
So as I mentioned earlier, the manufacturer should be ready to take actions to evaluate the possible sources, suppliers, and alternatives.
Yes. So basically, to what Vamsi just explained, that finding an alternative, it's a time-consuming procedure. I think the ECHA restriction proposal has been well thought through, and that is why when they have defined the restriction proposal, it comes with a 18 months transition period and then specifically divided into different derogation period for different type of product, for different type of PFAS, for different type of industry. And that is why the derogation periods are applicable 5 years or 13 years, depending upon how difficult it is for us to replace PFAS, right? And this brings us to a very crucial juncture where I would like to ask Sandeep, what should be the ideal plan of action for a medical device manufacturer amidst this PFAS regulation still shaping up, and while we are still waiting for ECHA to publish the final restriction?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Dolly, that it is still very uncertain. And given the regulatory uncertainty that we have, I think manufacturers need to adopt a very proactive plan that can mitigate future disruptions. Based on what we have come across with our experience with manufacturers, we see that they are currently posed with a horde of challenges, starting with the ever-changing regulatory landscape. And also we have the humongous task of reaching out to suppliers, the supplier management, and identification of PFAS in the supply chain, and maintaining of data. That is also a major challenge, if you would agree with me, that the data repository itself is so huge, and to find PFAS in such a large supply chain and maintain records is definitely a bigger challenge. And apart from that, we also have to look at setting a goal of reduction, and that needs to be achievable. And then we just don't have to look at regulatory compliance, but we also need to look at how to assess how to assess the regulatory changes in the future. So these are all the challenges that manufacturers are currently facing. So we have come up at Tata Elxsi, we have come up with a very proactive approach that can help manufacturers of mitigating challenges in a way. And the solution that we provide is flexible, and that can be adapted to the evolving regulatory requirements, and thus ensuring long-term success. So this ideal solution that we have that will help manufacturers in identifying the PFAS-related components in their supply chain, and they would also help to set goals of PFAS reduction. And finally, we could also pave their way towards elimination if required in the future. And this also includes an active vigilance program to map how regulations are shaping up.
Right.
And we also need to have close communication with suppliers, right? And while maintaining records, as I mentioned earlier. And another aspect is finding research, doing research for alternatives of PFAS. And all these are going to help the manufacturers to evaluate their current performance as well as validate compliance with the latest regulations. I think that is the solution that we have to start looking at.
Thank you. This ideal solution that you explained for PFAS mitigation sounds really wholesome, Sandeep. But while we are looking for alternatives, maybe Krishna, you can answer my next question, that given the environmental concerns that are growing up surrounding PFAS, what innovative solutions are being explored to ensure a sustainable future for the industries when they are relying on such chemicals?
That's a very interesting subject, Dolly. In fact, the European Union, along with the regulators, have initiated a Zero-F project for food packaging and upholstery textile value chain. This aims to replace PFAS with alternatives that maintain desired performance characteristics without environmental persistence. Several companies like Chemours, Solvay, Cefic, along with research organizations such as Fraunhofer Society, are involved in this Zero-F project, which is governed by ECHA. The aim of this project, this is a collaborative effort to develop and implement alternatives to PFAS, addressing industry and consumer hesitancy to move towards PFAS-free products, and to contribute to the phase out of these chemicals in these set of industries.
So you have shared very important information with us, Krishna, and we surely need to keep monitoring the results of this Zero-F project, because whatever alternate material they might identify during this process, even though if they are focused to textile or food packaging, the alternatives that they will come up with can be cross-pollinated into another industry. Of course, the validations will be required, but it can be used in other industries also. So a close monitoring is really a good thing that we can do. And apart from 0F project, there is also a 0PM project that is being governed by H 2020. And they are also working on elimination or removal of PFAS, and they are working on how to quickly replace PFAS and use other materials who are already present in the environment but not adding to the environmental pollution like PFAS. So the alternatives, whatever we find out either through 0F project or 0PM project, they can be replicated across the industries based upon respective or individual application of the product as needed. I understand that we are running out of time, but let me put across a final yet mandatory question to you, Vamsi. What are the expected timelines of further regulatory developments in PFAS restriction?
Let's start off with ICA, right? We are expecting that proposal to be out by early 2025. And like you said earlier, that we have a transition period. They have allocated a transition and derogation period based upon the uses and applications and how soon can you find an alternate material. So we have a transition period available of 18 months followed by a 5 to 12 years derogation period. Apart from that, we have US EPA. It has its Toxic Substance Control Act, and it mandates that all the manufacturers report the use of PFAS, where it is used, what is the production process, what is the disposal process, any exposures, hazards, etc. I think the reporting was supposed to start off actually by November 2024. However, I think due to budgetary constraints, it has been moved to July 2025. And even the CEPA, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, they also want all their manufacturers, in fact, anybody who has imported PFAS, used PFAS or manufactured it in Canada in the year of 2023, they want all the reporting to start by at least by January 2025. So these are the major timelines that we are looking at for PFAS phase out.
Thanks, Vamsi. That really paints a picture for us that as a manufacturer or a service industry, how much time we have to move away from PFAS, and in between this time, what type of reporting requirements we need to consider, whether it is from US EPA or other requirements perspective. In fact, I understand that the industry really needs to reassess the design of medical devices considering the PFAS restriction. To address this, the manufacturers really need to consider the strategies such as material substitution, process optimization, implementing a closed loop system, and investing in research and development for alternative materials. But when we talk about substitution or innovation, we really need to be cautious and not to take any action that we may regret in future, right? Think of PFAS as a contamination like glitter at a craft party, once it is there everywhere. It's on your clothes, in your hair, in your food, and it's very hard to clean up, right? And PFAS is like that. If it is there, it will stick around forever, reminding us of that one time that we thought that glitter was a good idea for a craft party, right?
Yes.
So thank you all for joining us today for this insightful discussion on PFAS and its impact on the medical device industry. And we have explored key topics including growing attention towards PFAS, its accumulation in the biological system, what are the challenges of navigating this global restriction which is shaping up, and the critical decision a manufacturer has to take in terms of reducing the use of PFAS, eliminating the use of PFAS. And we have also deep dived into the complexity of supply chain, the disruption that may come in future, and some of the actionable items that Sandeep explained to us, that how manufacturers can have an ideal proactive plan for this PFAS mitigation. And I would like to thank you, the TÜV SÜD team, for your valuable insights into the evolving regulatory requirements. Your expertise is essential as we collectively work towards ensuring compliance and innovation in the medical device industry. So today's session laid the foundation for us to understand multifaceted challenges that we have around the PFAS restriction and the ban that is upcoming. And this is just the beginning of our 3-part series. And there's much more to come. In the next episodes, we will deep dive into the solutions and innovations shaping the future of medical devices amidst this PFAS regulations shaping up. And you may stay tuned to see what is coming up next, and we will be rolling out next episodes very soon. And the audience may feel free to post their questions, and in a week's time we can come back to you with this recording as well as a comprehensive Q&A report.